I've always wanted to share this story, but it took me a while to decide if I really should. Fortunately, a friend of mine, who also listens to your channel, encouraged me. He even told me he had shared a paranormal experience with you before. So here I am, finally gathering the courage to tell what happened that night. You can call me Lily. This story took place in 2010 when I was in my second year of high school. My friends and I, 6 of us in total, decided to have a sleepover at our classmate Carla's house. The reason? We needed to practice a dance routine for a school performance, and our house was spacious enough for it. Our original plan was to meet earlier in the day, but everyone was busy, so we only managed to get together around 5 p.m. Once we were all there, we headed straight to Carla's house, excited and full of energy. Since we were all close friends, we spontaneously decided to stay the night. Some of the girls lived far away, and it seemed more practical to just sleep over instead of heading home late. Thankfully, when we asked for permission from our parents, they all agreed. Carla only lived with her older sister at the time, and she didn't seem to mind having guests. The night started off great. We practiced our routine with enthusiasm, completely losing track of time. By the time we finally stopped, it was already 9:30 p.m. We were exhausted but still in high spirits. We decided to take a short break and step out to buy some snacks before settling in for the night. When we got back, Carla pulled out a large king-sized mattress and placed it in the living room for us to sleep on. Since we were all quite petite, we managed to fit comfortably. The room was filled with laughter and chatter as we shared stories, making the most of our time together. Even Carla's sister joined in on the conversation for a while. Eventually, one by one, my friends started falling asleep. By 11:30 p.m., I was the only one still awake. I lay there with my eyes closed, trying to drift off, but something felt off. An eerie sensation settled over me, like an unseen presence lingering in the shadows. And then I heard it, a faint rustling sound, soft but unmistakable, coming from the far end of the room. At first I thought it was just one of the girls shifting in her sleep, but when I opened my eyes, I realized we were not alone. I couldn't sleep. No matter how much I tossed and turned there, my mind refused to rest. The quiet breathing of my friends filled the dimly lit living room, but a strange unease settled in my chest. Maybe it was just the excitement of the day, or maybe the unfamiliarity of sleeping in someone else's house. Either way, I decided to get up and grab some water from the kitchen, hoping it would help me relax. The kitchen was eerily silent. The only sound was the faint humming of the refrigerator. I poured myself a glass of water and sat down at the small dining table, absent-mindedly scrolling through my phone. Time slipped by, unnoticed. Then when I finally checked the screen, I realized it was already midnight. A sudden chill ran down my spine, making the hairs on my arms stand up. I brushed it off as my imagination and decided to return to the living room. As I made my way back to my spot on the mattress, just as I was about to lie down, knock, knock, knock. I froze. The sound came from the front door. My breath hitched. Who would be knocking at this hour? Carla's parents weren't home. They were both working abroad. It was just us and her older sister who had already gone to bed. I hesitated, waiting to see if it would happen again. Silence. Knock, knock, knock. Louder this time. My heart pounded. I sat up and glanced at my sleeping friends. No one else stirred. They hadn't heard it. I swallowed hard and turned toward the door. Then I made a decision. I had to wake Carla up. I reached over and gently shook her shoulder. In a hushed whisper, I told her what was happening. There's knocking at the door, twice now, but no one speaks. Carla groggily blinked at me, barely processing my words at first. Then after a second, she let out a tired sigh. "Oh, that's just our neighbor," she muttered, rubbing her eyes. "He has dementia. He does that sometimes. Knocks on random doors late at night. Just ignore it." I exhaled in relief. That made sense. Maybe I had been overthinking things. I nodded and lay back down, pulling the blanket over myself. But despite knowing the supposed explanation, I found it hard to fall asleep. My ears remained sharp, listening for any sound. A few minutes passed, then... Knock, knock, knock. This time, Carla immediately sat up. Something about the way she reacted sent a wave of fear crashing over me. She didn't look sleepy anymore. She looked afraid. She hesitated for a moment before quietly crawling toward the window beside the front door. The window was positioned in a way that allowed her to see who was outside before opening the door. I held my breath, watching her movements. She peeked through the curtains, and then she went completely still. Seconds passed. Slowly, she turned back to me, her face pale. Something was wrong. I sat up, my stomach tightening with dread. "Carla, who is it?" She didn't answer. Instead, she crawled back onto the mattress and lay down quickly, pulling the blanket over her head. That's when I saw it. Her hands were trembling. I grabbed her wrist, whispering frantically, "Carla, was it your neighbor?" She didn't move. I felt her fingers curl into a tight grip against the blanket. Then in the faintest, most terrified voice I had ever heard, she muttered, "No, it's not him." A shiver ran down my spine. I gripped her shoulder. "Then who?" For a long moment, Carla said nothing. Then after what felt like an eternity, she turned slightly towards me, her lips trembling. "I don't know," she whispered, her breath shaky. But it was tall, too tall. Carla was trembling. Her face had lost all color, and her hands clutched the blanket as if it was the only thing keeping her grounded. "It wasn't the neighbor," she whispered, her voice shaky. A cold shiver ran down my spine. "Then, who was it?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. She swallowed hard, glancing toward the front door as if expecting something or someone to be standing there. "It was Alan Sally." The name hit me like a wave of ice. Ailing Sally was their old neighbor, a kind elderly woman who often brought food and snacks to Carla and her sister, knowing they lived alone most of the time. She was like a second mother to them until the fire. Carla had told me that a month ago, Ailing Sally's house had burned down in the middle of the night. They said it was an accident, faulty wiring, but some people whispered about something else. Some believed she had been trapped, screaming for help as the flames swallowed her home. I felt a lump form in my throat. "But she's gone," I said. voice barely above a whisper. Carla nodded slowly, gripping my arm. That's what I thought too, until tonight. A heavy silence settled over us. The others were still sleeping, unaware of the terror Carla and I were experiencing. But just as I was about to lie back down and pretend none of this was happening, we heard it again. 3 knocks, louder, closer, more urgent. Carla flinched. I held my breath, my mind racing. The knocks weren't coming from the front door this time. They were coming from the window. And then, before either of us could react, we heard the voice. A soft, raspy whisper just outside the glass. Carla, let me in. Lola never wanted us to hire a caretaker for her. She said it would just be an unnecessary expense. Besides, we always made sure to visit her during special occasions, her birthday, Lolo's birthday. Even though he was gone, we still celebrated it. Christmas, New Year. No matter what, we would always gather at her house. Papa had been telling her for years to leave that old house and move in with us. He wanted her to be safe, to have someone looking after her at all times. But she refused. I'm not leaving, she would say, her voice always firm. I won't leave him behind. She meant Lolo. Even though he had been gone for a long time, she still spoke as if he was there. It was a Friday afternoon when I arrived at her house, heading straight there after school. I always stayed with her from Friday to Sunday, so I had brought a small bag with clothes. This wasn't something that happened years ago. This happened just last year. Lola was overjoyed to see me, hugging me tightly as if she hadn't seen me in forever. She even said something strange, something that sent a chill down my spine. Lola will be so happy you're here. I laughed nervously, brushing it off as one of her usual habits of speaking about Lolo in the present tense. But something felt off. She was acting different that day. She was unusually affectionate, kissing my forehead, hugging me constantly, telling me over and over how much she loved me and how she wanted me to do well in school. Then, out of nowhere, she asked, "Would you like some coffee? I'll make you some." I smiled and nodded. She always did this. I went to her room, placed my bag inside, and changed into comfortable clothes. But when I returned to the living room, something unnerved me. 2 cups of coffee sat on the table, one for me and one more. I hesitated, then asked, "Is someone else coming?" Lola simply smiled and shook her head. "No," she said softly. "That one is for Lolo." I forced a smile, swallowing the uneasy feeling building inside me. Maybe she was just missing him more than usual. But then, she spoke again. She wasn't talking to me. She turned slightly, her eyes fixed on the couch. And then she said, "See, I told you she would come." A sharp chill spread through my entire body. I stared at her, unsure whether I should be scared or heartbroken. She continued, "He's always here with me. Every night, he stays by my side." I stayed silent. "I hear him," she whispered. "He calls my name. He tells me he's waiting, that it's time for me to go with him." I did not know what to say. I wanted to tell her it was just her imagination, that she was just dreaming, that she was lonely, but I was too afraid to argue. So I changed the subject. I asked if we should buy food or cook something. She told me she had already prepared Lolo's favorite dish, Lolo. Again, it was always about Lolo. I tried to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach as we ate dinner. She seemed fine, happier than usual even. By 6:30 p.m., she said she was feeling tired and wanted to rest. I helped her to bed, then went to the kitchen to wash the dishes. And that's when I heard it, knocking. At first I thought it was one of my cousins or maybe Tito. I quickly dried my hands and went to the door. But when I opened it, there was no one there. A gust of cold wind brushed past me, sending shivers through my entire body. I hesitated, stepping out onto the porch. The gate was locked. Nobody could have gotten inside. My breath hitched. I knew I heard knocking. I turned around and rushed back inside, heading straight to Lola's room. I had to ask her if she had heard it too. But when I entered her room, she was still fast asleep. I stood there for a moment, confused and unsettled. Maybe I had imagined it? Maybe it came from the neighbor's house? I shook my head, convincing myself to let it go. So I went back to the kitchen, trying to finish cleaning as quickly as possible. But as I stood there, scrubbing the dishes, I felt it, that unshakable feeling, like I was not alone. The hair on my arms stood on end, and I could feel a cold presence behind me. I didn't turn around. I refused to turn around. Instead, I rushed back to Lola's room and lay down beside her, grabbing my phone and texting my mom. I told her Lola was asleep and that she had been talking about Lolo a lot today. She simply replied, "Let her be. She probably just misses him." I wanted to tell her everything else, about the extra cup of coffee, about the knocking, about the way my skin crawled just standing in that house. But I didn't. I didn't want her to worry. At around 9 p.m., sleep finally came over me, and I held Lola close, trying to ignore the fear lingering in my chest. But then, I woke up to the sound of knocking. Rapid, repetitive, desperate. I sat up quickly. Lola was awake too. She got out of bed, moving towards the bedroom door. As she reached for the handle, she whispered something. I could barely hear her, but it made my stomach drop. She opened the door slightly, speaking in a soft, almost reverent voice. Then she turned to me and said, "Come, move to the other room." "He's here." I couldn't shake off the cold feeling that had settled in the room. It was as if an icy wind had suddenly swept through, making the air heavy with an eerie presence. My grandmother looked at me with expectant eyes and said, "Bless your grandfather, dear. He's right here beside you." A shiver ran down my spine. It felt as though my entire body had turned to ice. I jolted up from the bed, clutching her tightly. "Grandma, please tell me you're joking," I pleaded, my voice trembling. But she simply smiled and nodded towards an empty space beside me. "He's here, watching over us." Tears welled up in my eyes, fear clawing at my chest. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then she asked me, "Why are you so afraid of your grandfather? When he was alive, you were his favorite grandchild." I wanted to tell her that things were different now, that he wasn't supposed to be here anymore, that if she truly saw him, I didn't want to know. I begged her not to speak about it again, not to tell me if she saw him, because I was terrified. She nodded as if she understood and lay back down. I didn't dare leave her side that night. I held on to her tightly until exhaustion overtook me, and I finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. The next morning, I was plagued with doubt. Should I continue staying with her? The thought of her seeing things that I couldn't, of hearing knocks in the dead of night, made my stomach churn. But despite everything, I couldn't leave her alone. The following weekend, I convinced my cousin to come along with me. To my relief, he agreed without hesitation. From then on, I never visited my grandmother alone again. We always went together, from Friday afternoons to Sunday evenings. I felt safer that way. The house no longer felt as cold, and the unsettling knocks on the door stopped. My grandmother, too, spoke less and less about my grandfather. It was as if his presence had finally faded. Months passed, and then one morning, tragedy struck. My grandmother was found lifeless in her bedroom. My uncle discovered her frail body lying peacefully as if she had simply gone to sleep and never woken up. But before she left, she had written a letter, a final message to us. She urged us never to sell the house, to always keep it clean, and to continue gathering there for celebrations, just as we always had. She wanted the memories of our family to live on within its walls. And so, we honored her wishes. Even though she and my grandfather were gone, we continued to come together, sharing stories and laughter, remembering the love that had once filled that home. I used to scoff at ghost stories. I thought people who believed in them were foolish. But now, after everything I've experienced, I can no longer deny what I once dismissed. I have become one of those people.
David's story.
My name is David. My mother is Bisaya, and my father is Elkanah. If I occasionally mix languages while speaking, I ask for your understanding, Servan, or if needed, you can translate it into Tagalog. This story took place in 2023 in the apartment I was renting at the time. I was a manager at a grocery store, and my home was too far from work. So, I decided to rent a small apartment closer to my job. The place wasn't big, but it was enough for me since I lived alone. My unit was on the ground floor, while another tenant, a female nurse, lived upstairs. We became close because she was friendly and outgoing. Whenever she saw me, she would wave and smile. Sometimes, when she had problems with her boyfriend, she would visit my unit to talk. I always knew it was her knocking, because she had a habit of knocking twice, then immediately calling my name. She would vent about her relationship troubles, about how jealous and immature her boyfriend was. Their arguments often led to breakups, but they always ended up getting back together. One night, everything changed. I was ready to call it a night, scrolling through my newsfeed in bed, when I suddenly heard 2 knocks on my door. It was the signature knock of Sarah, the nurse who lived in the unit above mine. She always knocked twice before calling my name. Assuming she had just had another argument with her boyfriend and needed someone to talk to, I called out, "Wait a sec." While getting up from bed, I sighed, preparing myself for another round of emotional venting. But just as I reached the door, my phone rang. It was Sarah. I found it odd why. Would she call me if she was already at my door? Still, I answered, "Hold on, I'm about to open." Her voice interrupted me. She was sobbing, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." Confused, I asked, "Sarah, what's wrong? What are you talking about?" But before she could respond, the call cut off. My stomach twisted in unease. I yanked the door open, expecting to see her standing there. But the hallway was empty. There was no sign of Sarah. The air was eerily still. Feeling a sudden sense of dread, I hurried upstairs to her unit. I knocked several times. "Sarah, are you okay? Open up." But there was no answer. I tried calling her, again nothing. The line was dead. Panic started setting in. That was when the tenant from the neighboring unit opened their door and peered out, looking for Sarah. "She hasn't come home yet. I was just outside a while ago, and I didn't see her enter the building." A chill ran down my spine. "Are you sure? Someone just knocked on my door." I thought it was her. The neighbor shook their head. "No way. If she had come in, I would have seen her." I felt my hands grow clammy. That didn't make any sense. Who knocked on my door, then? And if Sarah wasn't home, where was she? Trying to calm myself, I opened my phone and checked her social media. Maybe she had posted something. I scrolled through her profile and saw a new post. Just one simple sentence in capital letters. "I'm tired." That uneasy feeling in my gut intensified. Something was definitely wrong. A terrifying thought crept into my mind. What if she had done something reckless? What if she was in danger? My mind raced with worst-case scenarios. I thought about reaching out to her boyfriend, but I didn't have his number. I paced the hallway, debating what to do next when my phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah's number, but what I saw made my blood run cold. The message was just one word: help. I immediately tried calling her again, but the number was unreachable. A sense of urgency took over. I had to do something fast. Without another second of hesitation, I grabbed my keys and ran out of the building, determined to find Sarah before it was too late. I struggled to calm myself as my whole body trembled with worry. My mind raced with anxious thoughts, praying that nothing terrible had happened to Sarah. I returned to my bed, but my restlessness wouldn't let me sleep. My heart pounded in my chest, and every sound in the apartment felt amplified, sending shivers down my spine. Then, once again, the knocking came to distinct raps against the door. My stomach twisted into knots. Without thinking, I practically flew to the door, desperate to see Sarah standing there. But when I yanked it open, the hallway was empty. My breath hitched in my throat. Fear took root deep in my chest, and I hesitated to even step forward. Something felt wrong. I looked down at the ground and noticed a small puddle of water right at my doorstep. There was no leak from the ceiling, and it hadn't rained. The water was just there. The eeriness of it sent chills crawling up my arms. That entire night was agonizing. I must have drifted off into an uneasy sleep on the couch, only to be awakened by the commotion outside my apartment. Voices, hushed yet frantic, filled the corridor. My stomach lurched as I made out Sarah's name among their murmurs. I bolted out the door, nearly knocking into one of the neighbors. "Sarah?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, terrified of the answer I might receive. One of them looked at me with sorrow-filled eyes and nodded. She jumped off the bridge. It felt like the ground beneath me vanished. My body went cold, my mind unable to process what I had just heard. I had feared something was wrong, but I never imagined, never expected. A sharp pang of regret cut through me. Had I searched for her that night? Could I have saved her? Was that her calling me, seeking comfort, before she made her final decision? My knees nearly buckled as I realized that the very moment our call had cut off might have been the moment she let go. I needed to know more. I forced myself to watch the CCTV footage from the bridge. It showed her standing there for a long time, looking out over the water. And then my breath caught as I noticed something chilling. She was talking. There was no one around her, yet she spoke as if someone stood beside her. And then, without hesitation, she jumped. Her body was recovered, and her remains were sent back to her family. I attended her wake and burial, feeling the heavy weight of grief settle over me. But one thing gnawed at my soul. Her boyfriend never showed up. Not once. He vanished as if he had never been part of her life. I returned to the apartment, but it no longer felt like home. Every night after Sarah's passing, the knocking returned. 2 firm knocks, just like before. I knew it wasn't her, and yet, deep inside, I wished it was. Despite the fear creeping into my bones, I would still open the door every time. The hallway would always be empty, but I would whisper into the void, "Sarah, if it's you, please talk to me. Come to me in my dreams. Tell me what happened." But she never did, not even once. Then, after 40 days, the knocking stopped. Silence took its place, and with it, a sense of emptiness that could never be filled. The knocking stopped. Perhaps she had finally moved on to heaven. That was all, Savan. Thank you so much for your patience in reading this. God bless.
Hello, Sir Malik. First of all, I want to express my gratitude for giving me the chance to share my terrifying experience at my aunt's antique shop. You can call me Shell. I won't reveal where I'm from, but I will never forget this incident. It happened on December 9th, 2019, a date forever burned into my memory, because it was the day I almost became just another ghost story. I was often left alone to watch over my aunt's antique shop. She also had a small convenience store next to it, which was her main focus. Since the 2 stores were side by side, it was convenient for her to manage both. My aunt would usually sleep in her store, while I stayed in the antique shop. Sometimes we slept together in her store since her sleeping cot was big enough for both of us. My aunt had raised me as if I were her own child, as she never married or had children. It was just the 2 of us, and I loved her dearly. That night, around 8 p.m., my aunt told me she was going to a wake, and that I should look after the convenience store while she was gone. I agreed and watched her leave before settling in. However, after a few minutes, I suddenly remembered that I had left my phone in the antique shop. Since I had locked the shop before leaving, I hurried back to retrieve it. Upon entering the dimly lit store, I immediately started searching for my phone. but I couldn't remember where I had placed it. That's when I heard the loud slamming of the front door, followed by aggressive, rapid knocking. The sound was so forceful that it echoed through the entire shop, making my heart pound in fear. Someone or something was outside, knocking as if they were furious. "Tita, is that you? Hold on a second," I called out, thinking she had returned early and was upset that I had left the store unattended. But something felt off. The knocking was relentless, growing louder, more impatient. My hands shook as I moved toward the door, hesitating before unlocking it. The moment I pulled it open, there was nothing. No one was there. A chill ran down my spine as I stepped outside, scanning the street. It was empty. The road stretched into darkness, and there were no signs of movement. If someone had knocked that loudly, they would have had to run away in mere seconds, but I would have heard footsteps. Instead, there was only silence, thick and suffocating. Trying to shake off the fear creeping into my chest, I convinced myself that maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe the wind had rattled the door. Maybe it was just some prankster. But deep down, I knew better. I re-entered the shop and resumed my search for the phone. Just as I was about to give up, I heard it. Footsteps. They were slow, deliberate, moving closer to me. The sound echoed against the wooden floor. But what chilled me to the bone was the distinct clack-clack sound they made. It wasn't the sound of regular shoes. It was the sound of bacculed wooden clogs, the kind worn by people from long ago. I wasn't alone. Sir Van. I immediately turned around to see who it was, but there was no one there. A deep sense of unease crept over me, sending shivers down my spine. My hands turned cold, and my breathing became uneven. Then, out of nowhere, the door of an antique cabinet swung open with a creaking noise. I caught sight of a shadow inside it just as another loud knock echoed through the shop's front door. At that moment, I didn't care about my phone anymore. Panic took over me, and I bolted out of the shop. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, and in my desperation to escape, I ran straight onto the road completely unaware that a car was speeding toward me. The driver honked loudly, screeching to a stop just inches away from hitting me. Shaken, I turned around to apologize, but before I could say a word, the driver's eyes widened in pure horror. His face went pale, and he suddenly sped off without looking back, as if he had seen something terrifying behind me. By then, my whole body was trembling. My mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. It felt like I had just escaped something sinister. I didn't dare go back into the shop. Instead, I ran straight to my aunt, knowing exactly where the wait she was attending was being held. When she saw me, she was taken aback. I was drenched in sweat, my skin pale as a ghost. "What happened to you?" she asked, concern lacing her voice. I told her everything: the knocking, the cabinet door opening by itself, the shadow, and the eerie silence that followed. At first, she didn't believe me. She thought maybe some pranksters had knocked on the door and run away. But I insisted. "No, Auntie, I swear to you, there was no one there." If it was just a person, I would have seen them. Her expression shifted. She fell silent, staring at me with wide eyes. That's terrifying, she finally muttered. Then something else dawned on me. I had slept in that shop so many times before, yet I had never experienced anything strange. But now, I remembered there was a particular antique cabinet that had been returned by a previous buyer. They had refused to keep it, and that was the same cabinet that had swung open tonight, as if something had stepped out of it. Without wasting any time, my aunt and I decided to return to the shop together. Neither of us wanted to enter alone. We held on to each other tightly as we cautiously stepped inside, our eyes darting around. We were so tense, we looked like burglars sneaking into our own store. We waited, listened. Nothing. The shop was eerily quiet. Then my eyes landed on the table and there it was, my phone, sitting there as if it had been placed intentionally. But that didn't make any sense. I had searched that spot multiple times earlier. There was no way I could have missed it. It felt like something was playing tricks on me. As my aunt and I prepared to leave, we heard a noise, a loud thud from inside the shop. Our breath caught in our throats, and then another knock. But this time, it didn't come from the front door. It came from inside. Pure terror gripped us. My aunt, who was already a nervous person, started shaking uncontrollably. "What is happening in this shop?" she stammered.
A new story, Bagans.
Good day, Sir Van. My name is McKay, and I want to share my own chilling experience, one that still haunts me to this day. This is about a series of eerie knocks and a terrifying apparition. My sister-in-law and I were extremely close while she was alive. She was the only one among my husband's siblings with whom I shared a deep bond. Her sudden passing was devastating for me. She and her older brother were in an accident, and sadly, she was the only one who didn't survive. The grief was unbearable, and even after she was gone, I felt her presence lingering around me. At times, I would feel an unusual coldness in my body, but I always dismissed it as the weather. However, whenever I asked others if they felt the same, they would say it was actually warm. This event happened just last year during the storm named Crazy. Heavy rains poured nonstop, causing severe flooding inside our house. My mother-in-law suggested that my child and I sleep in my sister-in-law's old room, as it was on higher ground and wouldn't be affected by the rising waters. She even asked me if I was afraid to stay there, considering my sister-in-law had passed away 2 years ago. I assured her that I wasn't scared. After all, she hadn't made her presence known in a long time, not since we held her first death anniversary. I believed she had already moved on. That night, the rain and wind howled outside, creating an unsettling atmosphere. Then, as if things couldn't get worse, the electricity went out. With no other source of light, I relied on my phone's flashlight. At around 11 p.m., I heard a faint knocking at the door. I thought my mother-in-law might have needed something, so I got up and went to check. But when I opened the door, no one was there. I brushed it off and returned to bed. Lying there, I absent-mindedly stared at the pictures of my sister-in-law on the wall, remembering the happy moments we shared. Suddenly, the knocking resumed, but this time it was louder and more urgent. I quickly opened the door, expecting to see someone, but again, there was no one there. I found it strange because the hallway was illuminated by a solar-powered light, meaning I should have seen anyone who passed by. And then, my heart stopped. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadowy figure standing near the wall. Slowly, I turned my head, and there she was, my sister-in-law. She was wearing the exact same clothes she had on when she died, stained with blood. She stood with her back to me, but I knew it was her. My whole body froze in fear. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying that when I opened them, she would be gone. After a few seconds, I dared to look again, and she had vanished. My heart pounded wildly. I wanted to run, but I had nowhere else to go. The main house was flooded, and my child was still fast asleep beside me. I had no choice but to stay. Shaking, I crawled back into bed, held my child tightly, and whispered softly, "Please, stop scaring me." You know, I'm afraid of ghosts. I must have fallen asleep despite my fear, because the next thing I knew, I woke up to another loud knocking. This time, I didn't move. I refused to open the door again. I buried myself under the blanket, covered my ears, and forced myself to ignore the persistent sounds. After a while, the knocking finally stopped, and exhaustion overtook me. When morning came, I told my mother-in-law everything. To my shock, she revealed that she and my father-in-law also heard knocking on their door that night. They even opened it multiple times, assuming it was me, but each time, no one was there. We then discovered something strange. My sister-in-law's speaker, which she had saved up for and cherished dearly, was submerged in water. Despite the flooding, it was still functioning. She had always been meticulous about her belongings and hated seeing them damaged or misplaced. That night was the last time she ever knocked or appeared to me. It seemed like she only wanted to be acknowledged one final time. She was only 18 when she passed, with so many dreams ahead of her. It's heartbreaking to think about how her life was cut so short. But in the end, all we can do is accept the past and continue living.
If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow. Also, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new content. Let me know in the comments what you liked, what you didn't, and any constructive feedback you have. Love to hear from you. Your support and input help make future videos even better. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.